Welcome to the Directors UK podcast. We're the professional association for UK film and TV directors. No matter the format, no matter the genre, our featured directors share their approach to the craft. We hope you enjoy.
Hello everyone and good evening. Tonight we'll be hosting Nightbitch with an in-conversation afterwards with director Marielle Heller and Tinge Krishnan. Enjoy Nightbitch, guys. Thank you.
Hey guys, how much did you love that movie?
Put him on the spot.
I was in the cinema with them though, and I've been in the cinema for the past 3 viewings, and it's just been lovely. It's been like electric, and everyone's been laughing, and there's been like ripples of anger and like ripples of pain, and like husbands and wives looking at each other, not so sure anymore. And it's been like, for me as a filmmaker, and you're all filmmakers here, and we all get vulnerable, and we're in that space of falling out of congruence with like the social norms. We all have that feeling, and when I watched this movie, I came out of it and I felt inspired and connected and empowered, and I got my creative mojo back. And so I just really want to thank you as a filmmaker and a human and a mum for making that. And also I want to honour you amongst your peers, because what we know is that journey that you made us have it came about through these really beautiful shifts of tone, from like cuteness to like real pain to like rage and then horror, moments of horror. And it's so beautifully crafted. And so none of that was accidental. And we all know, right, like nothing gets through that lens that hasn't been curated and thought about. And this tone that you held was so delicate. So it would be lovely if you could step us through that journey to create this. And I was thinking maybe we could start at the genesis of when you first got presented with the novel, and you found, how you found your take on it, that initial take, and how you shared that with the producers.
So Amy Adams, her company, and Annapurna optioned the book first, and they brought it to me and sent it to me when it hadn't been published yet, which truthfully, I didn't have high hopes. I guess I don't know. I didn't feel like it was necessarily, just based on what I heard on paper, I didn't think it was going to be something that spoke to me quite so deeply. But when you read something or see something, I think that feels like it's reflecting exactly where you are in your life, it feels so cathartic and wonderful. And that's how Rachel's book felt to me. It was so funny and so rageful, and it was saying all these things that I felt like, oh my God, are we allowed to say this? Like, this is so... Oh, I'm so happy she's saying this. And I wanted every one of my friends to read it immediately. And, but it wasn't very cinematic. The book was really internal. It was sort of like a large internal monologue in a lot of ways. So I didn't even really have a take to begin with, to be honest. Luckily, no one was really asking that of me. Mm-hmm. I had known Sue Nagel for a long time, and I had never worked with Amy before, but I think because I had worked with people she knew and she had brought it to me, nobody really said, like, what are you going to do with it? Because I would not have been able to answer it. I just finally, after kind of sitting with it for a while, I also had just had my second kid. I was really in a kind of, it was right after the pandemic. I was in a kind of low place emotionally. I hadn't been working in a little while by choice, because having a kid is kind of one of the only ways that I really take much time off. But it just kind of came to me at the right moment in time. And then I sat with it for a while, and then slowly started to imagine how I thought it could be a movie. And one of the first things that I realized was like that I would want to have a birth scene within the film, and that I would want it to be a really honest, actual birth scene.
And so that birth scene wasn't actually in the book?
No.
Oh, okay.
But I had just had my second kid, who was a daughter, after having a boy. So clearly, I put a lot of my own life, I will say, into this movie.
Because there was, so in terms of like what you lost and what you kept,
yeah,
and what you added, Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, I'll say, for anybody who's adapted a book, it's not always this wonderful relationship between the author and the person who's adapting the book. But I got so lucky with Rachel Yoder because she was so generous. She like really understood innately, even though this was her first novel, and she could have been really precious about the whole thing. But she just seemed to really understand that I needed to like let it grow into something new. And I never once through the whole process felt like she was holding on too tightly or even trying to control anything I was doing with it. She kind of, early on, I've gotten a little better about speaking up for what I need creatively, slowly. And early on, I just said, like, I just need to work on this by myself, and I'm going to need to be able to take some creative license. And I love your book, but just that's kind of my process, and if that's okay with you. And she was just like, got it, and let me really kind of just take it and run with it.
So did you do any meetings with her and have input from her or show her any drafts?
No.
And then so when you kind of started, so you then were just quite free to just channel through.
Yeah, then I was just like living my life, starting to write the script with very little oversight because it was sort of like everybody had brought it to me just with a lot of trust and a lot of faith of like, okay, so do what you will. And I just started working on it. And I really was writing it in the naps of my daughter, who was 6 months old. I was like putting her down for a morning nap and putting my big kid in front of the TV and writing. And so I was just channeling all of my anger and frustrations and the things I was finding funny about my life into this script.
And so what was your actual process? Did you like cut out bits that you liked or how did it
No,
happen?
it's so funny. I was just doing a talk about adaptation, and I feel like, it's really, I think it seems like the first thing you would do would be like highlighting and cutting and pasting things you actually liked, but I have to start from total scratch. And I have to like read the source material a bunch of times, really absorb it, and then kind of almost forget about it and see if I can start writing it almost from memory so that and then of course I go back to it a million times. But often I have to like kind of structure something. It really has to become something new. And if I feel too much like, oh, what did she say there? Or how did she get from this to this? Then I'm like, it's still in that form instead of being in its next form, if that makes sense. And the book, it didn't have any dialogue. It was really just like a internal monologue of a woman, and there were really funny sequences and kind of scenes, but it also had a much longer arc. You couldn't quite tell kind of the time frame that it took place in, and there were a lot of storylines that I couldn't keep, that even in some versions of the script I did try to keep, but that just didn't work cinematically, or they didn't have as clear of an arc for me. Like one really sort of clear example that I can remember is that the mothers at Book Babies, the moms she sort of judges in the beginning, in the book she kind of had this theory, maybe there are these other dogs, and then when she went to investigate it, she finds out that they're actually all in a multi-level marketing scheme, like a pyramid scheme, and they're selling herbs to each other, and they have nothing to do with dogs. And it was funny, like it was a funny reveal. But when I really thought about my main character and what she needed to do and accomplish over the course of this movie, I was like, I think her journey is from judging these other moms to realizing she needs a pack and realizing that she needs the company of other moms in order to survive. And like, this is all muddling that. So it was a lot of things like that where there were kind of wonderful storylines that were really fun to read in a novel, but just didn't sort of serve a larger cinematic story.
Yeah. And in terms of then the overarching story that crystallized for you, like, because it feels like psychologically, I think you said something about anger, right? You said, to me, Nightbitch represents the mother's rage in parts that are not integrated in herself.
Yeah. I kept thinking about how she's starting the journey in a place of, she's almost not in her body. She's like floating separate from her body. And she's got so much repressed rage and disappointment and loss of identity and a just feeling of not being herself anymore. So much so that this Nightbitch kind of bursts out of her because it's so repressed and not integrated into her life. And I thought a lot about basically her three main relationships: her relationship with her son, her relationship with her husband, and her relationship with herself and her art. And that she feels like she's failing in all three of those areas of her life, which is how I've felt in lots of phases of my life, where I'm like, I'm not doing well in my career, and I'm also not doing well. I feel like I'm spending too much time with my kids to be doing well with my career, and too much time with my career to be doing well with my kids. And but just really getting to this idea that she's almost like has no life force in her, like she's just given everything away, and she's kind of walking zombie at the beginning. And then how do we get to a point where what she chooses by the end of the movie is to go through it again and have another child, and that's sort of this ultimate leap of faith and choice to choose optimism. I was also pregnant during the pandemic, and I had a friend who said to me, you know, the world is really bleak right now, and yet you're having a baby, and having a baby feels like kind of the ultimate act of optimism. And at the time, that felt like a really painful statement, because I didn't get pregnant purposefully when the pandemic had happened. I was already pregnant when the pandemic happened, and it was hard to be optimistic in that moment in time. But I thought a lot about how that, to do it a second time, when you actually know how hard it is, you feel like I must be crazy to do this again, but I also am consciously choosing it, so I must do it because I'm actually kind of diving in with eyes open. And so if the big question for her is, did everything in my life get ruined by becoming a mother? Did I make a huge mistake? Have I ruined my career and my marriage and my relationship to myself? And then the answer to that has to be to have another baby. So that's saying, no, this is what I want in my life.
And there's also like a lovely, like the container of the relationship is beautifully explored as well.
Yeah.
And that coming together, like two people who have disconnected and each of them lost themselves and lost their, can you talk a bit about that? It's
yeah,
really
that's
beautiful.
another area where I feel like I sort of took what Rachel had in the book and then brought my own marriage and relationship into the story and kind of made it a little bit more of what felt like a complete cinematic journey for me. You know, in the book, there was a lot that was left unsaid at the end of the book, which I think you can do sometimes in a novel, but I had this desire for the mother to say certain things to her husband and to actually hold him accountable for the ways in which he had failed her, and to really like actually unleash her rage on him in any moment, which in the book she just never did. Maybe Rachel's just a nicer wife than me. But I also really had this feeling of like I wanted the man in this movie to be held accountable and to actually have to take accountability for his ways in which, even if it was just sort of unconsciously, not very thoughtfully not supporting her, that it still was choosing his own selfishness over seeing his wife as a complete person. And so that was kind of a big shift where I realized I needed the characters to break up. I needed it to push it as far as it could go so that you really believe they may not be able to return. And so that she could experience both life where all she does is parent and she doesn't have the balance of her work, and then she goes fully into work but doesn't have the balance of her family life, and then hopefully can integrate her rage but integrate her work and her family life.
And there's a clear journey for him as well. And I think that's also where I feel like it communicates across. It's not just like, you know, although there are a cis male and cis female couple in this, it feels like, you know, it goes across all different kinds of relationships where parenting has caused some kind of imbalance. I
think there's almost always a primary parent and a secondary parent in any kind of relationship. It's not always the woman and the man. I think the same thing happens in my friends who have two women. There just tends to be one parent who takes the brunt of the work on, and then the more that happens, the worse it gets, and the more it goes unspoken, the worse it gets. Particularly if one person's career becomes more important than the other person's career.
Yeah, important. according
Important.
to how society views
I mean,
it.
I've had a friend of mine who actually said to me at one point when my husband and I were trying to navigate like where we would live based on our careers. And she said, I don't know what to tell you. My husband and I have always sort of known his career was more important than mine. And I was like, what? They're since divorced. So.
And I think what I love about the script and the way you've visualized it and created it is, despite all this pain, there's like huge amounts of love and humor and comedy.
Yeah.
You know, like when he goes off and he's on his own and all the divorced dads are confused. And
Yeah, that was all
a
very fun thing to invent. It's also the only moment in the movie where I really shift perspective. It's such a subjective movie and everything is through her eyes and her perspective, but I very consciously shifted perspective to give him a moment of him being the one who's having with the spaghetti on the floor, and he even hears a little howl off in the distance. He has his own Nightbitch moment.
Yeah. And fair play. They have some pretty charged conversations without, like, my husband's in the audience. We do it with a counsellor. They do it on their own, and they do it really well. Can you talk a bit about those? You know, was there any improv, and how much? You know, what did you write, and how did it all?
No, there was no improv. I mean, truthfully, I don't really love improv because I like to work on a script, and I love it when actors tell me that something's not working, and then I get to go rewrite it and shift it based on what they're feeling isn't working. But my husband's a comedian. He comes from like a total improv world. I don't love improv because I think sometimes the things that feel funny or like they really work on the day just don't end up better than the thing you've been thoughtfully writing over many months. Every once in a while, of course, like improv, it just adds so much and can be so wonderful. But I'd like things to feel like they're being said for the first time, even though they're very thoughtfully crafted based on, lots of work. So no, the fight scenes were really choreographed and very, like the big fight scene was very scripted, and I like to have actors pretty much stick to the script. I come from theater, so in theater you don't change it even a word, you know.
And did you rehearse with them? Like, what was the process?
We rehearsed just the two of them. That was sort of the only rehearsal we did was between the married couple, and we only got to do it for a couple days. But I sort of always insist on rehearsal, especially for people who are supposed to have such a history with each other, like a married couple. And because, of course, we shoot out of order and all of that, I just like to rehearse the scenes in order at least once so that they have a sense of their journey, even if once we go back to shoot it, it's shot totally out of order, but that we can all kind of check in on that first rehearsal where we really did get to do it at least once chronologically.
And so how long did you have for that piece of work?
Maybe 2 days.
Okay. And then did you take in notes from that rehearsal and then integrate that into the writing again?
No, because the fight scenes that I wrote were like so from my own life and so personal. They thought they were very well written and they all worked out pretty well. So the only thing I can really think of was we were very careful to want to make sure that Scoot never seemed like too much of a dick. Like that wasn't the point. The point wasn't to just make him. So there were like little tiny things where we were just kind of modulating how rough something he said might feel.
Did you have like any alternates, or did you it was all just one thing and you just feel like, okay, this works or this doesn't work kind of thing?
No, there weren't really any alternates, not for those scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, there were obviously like the scenes with the sun, there were so many more moments of improvisation and things that were spontaneous and happened and that made it into the movie of, But when it came to the stuff between the two of them, because so much of it with a married couple is about what's not said or what is implied with a look or a small grunt, it was much more kind of choreographed, if that makes sense. Like one of my favorite moments in the movie is when he comes in the morning after they've had like a rough night and he's going to make coffee and she's doing the dishes and there's no one says anything. And then he says, "Did you make coffee yet?" And she says, "No, can you?" And it's just got that little edge to it. And then he asks her how many scoops it is. And my husband read that scene and was like, fuck you, I know how to make coffee. And I was like, you don't know how to make coffee. And you always ask me how many scoops it is. Just make the coffee. It's just one of those married couple things where if they had improv'd it and like filled in those quiet gaps, I would have lost all the tension that I wanted in that, which was just like, say it without saying it.
And then like they do that thing by the sink.
And then he goes to get the...
Did you choreograph that as well?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, they they probably hesitated one or more two times more than I expected, but it was exactly that. It was like, go over, don't make room for him. You're mad. And then he kind of moves his way into the sink, and then, I don't know. I had a lot of fun. And thought those scenes were so funny. And then I couldn't tell if anyone else was thinking they were funny, I guess.
But you guys found it funny, right? I could hear. Yeah.
Anyone who's been in a long-term relationship finds it funny.
And then, like, talking about the, the child elements of it, because that's such a huge part, and it feels so real. When you're at the writing stage, and you're, you know what I mean? You're the mum of kids, and you're knowing how unreliable children are as performers and colleagues. How, when you wrote it, what was your thinking?
I don't know. Everyone who read early drafts of the script was like, this is great, but how are you going to do this? Like, how are you going to get any kid to do this? This makes no sense. And for some reason, I was like, I don't know. I think it's going to work out. Like, I just had but I knew that was something that was going to be the big challenge of the movie. Was like, I really, really, really wanted a very realistic relationship between a mother and a child depicted on screen that felt real. Because I just never feel like anything feels real. And if we're going to go on the journey with her to feel all of the pain and the frustration she must feel and all of it, we have to actually experience it. We can't, the kid has to be rambunctious and funny and cute and frustrating and all of these things all at the same time, And so we found these twins. We found them on a twins board, like Facebook board, and had them come in to meet with me. I met tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of twins.
How many did you meet, and over what time period?
I don't know how many I met, but it was in the months right before filming, because I also didn't want to meet twins too far ahead, where then they would change and become different kids by the time we were filming. So it was all within the weeks before we were filming. And these particular boys, and what I did was I didn't have them come into a casting office, because that would be weird. We just met at a park, and I had just play dates basically with the kids. And when Arlie and Emmett came in for the first time, they both fell asleep in the car on the way there. And so they were really sleepy, and they weren't very playful, and they kind of didn't do a lot. And we kind of sent them on their way, even though their mom was really nice, of like, that was nice, thank you. And then she called back and she said, I know what you're looking for is like rambunctious little boys, and my kids are crazy. And like, please give them another chance, because what you saw was just not them. And I was like, okay. And so they came back in, and this time they were just so funny. Like, when a kid will just riff with you, even if they don't know you that well, and you can get like a game going or a joke going with them, and they'll just like play along. And that's how they were. They were not intimidated. They had been in school since they were really little, and in daycare since they were really little. So they weren't like clinging to their mom's leg. They weren't too afraid. They were really kind of outgoing, but there was nothing self-conscious about them. They were just they're 2 when I met them, but they're just hilarious, and they would play with me. And so a lot of what I did with them, like on my second or third meeting with them, probably on my third meeting with them, because then we did meet in the casting office, was I like played the mom essentially, and like rolled around on the floor with them and had them play doggy with me, and asked them to climb on my back and tell me that my back was fuzzy. And, I did a lot of call and response, and just kind of like, okay, ready, we're going to play a game, see if you can say exactly what I say. And I would just start barking at them, or say, Mama Fuzzy, or come here. No, you come here. No, you come here. Whatever. And just play with them until I could get them being silly and feeling real, but also kind of nudging them into a scene, sort of.
And did you just trust that the chemistry between them and Amy would work and be fine? Like, how did that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
she didn't get to like chemistry test with them or anything, but yeah.
Yeah. And so then in terms of like how that unfolded into their prep process. Like, how did what process did you have for her to acclimatize? And
they just showed up on the day, and I think the first day was us filming them in the park. So it was kind of low stakes. We started with her just kind of pushing them on the swings and playing with them, and it was pretty chill. It wasn't anything too dramatic. But I do think maybe on our second day, we were still in the park, and we had to do this scene where he gets lost and she can't find him. And then she kind of runs over a hill, and he's on the other side of the hill. And of course, he's met this woman the day before. They've been having lots of fun. She's been really nice to him. And then all of a sudden, she starts running for him, like screaming. And he just got up and started booking it. And I was like, of course he did. Like, he's a regular child there's a crazy lady like running at him screaming. And we all felt so bad, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And so then we made it. We were like, okay, we do want you to sit here. And he was kind of like, and we were like, let's play a game. You got to count to 10, close your eyes, count to 10, because we're playing hide and go seek, and then you can get up and run. And just, finding ways to make everything a game. And as soon as it was over, her being like, no, look, I'm not mad. I promise I'm not mad at you. But it was just like a little bit of a learning curve.
And did they start to understand the process? So it sounds
Yes.
like, yeah.
They did. Especially, they were different. I mean, they're two different people, right?
Yeah.
With very different interests and desires. One of them really got into the kind of game of pretend. And anytime you hear the child in the movie say mama or dada, it was Arlie, because he kind of really understood. Emmett would always say movie mama and movie dada, but Arlie I'm supposed to pretend this is my mama. And he also was good at sleeping. He would, you could say like, okay, we're going to go to sleep now. And he would like actually relax his face. Emmett, if I said go to sleep, he would just lie there with his eyes open. Like, but Emmett was also really technical. He loved all the microphones and like the camera, and you could kind of give him a task. You could be like, you got to measure this whole thing before we get out of here. And, he would just start measuring things. And he was just really doing whatever we were working on.
What he was doing in the museum?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tape measure.
So was that not in the script? That was
No.
Okay.
That was like, what can we do to keep him busy and in this area for a while? It was always about props. It was always like spray bottles or little toys, but it had to be something they hadn't played with the day before, something that was also cleared by the props department, but they could play with on camera.
So it all had to be child-friendly, right, this stuff?
Yeah, it had to be child-friendly, and it had to not have any labels or be something that they brought from home, and it had to be cleared. And yeah, so it was just about having like a million different things and being like, he's not into that today. We need something else. Whatever it might be.
Yeah, and then that scene where she chucks the towel at Scoot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that for real when he goes, what just happened?
Yes.
Okay.
That was so great because there's this, so that's one of the scenes. We had two cameras where we put a camera on him and he's watching. I love his performance in that. He's watching the two of them like a tennis match. And you can tell the moment she walks in, because she's acting and she seems pissed, his face changes like, uh-oh, she's mad. It just felt so like the real kid reaction would be. And then he goes, what happened? It was exactly just from him seeing her throw the towel for the first time.
Wow. And then like when they were crying,
yeah.
And then, there's him, her son's crying. And then you've got kids in the library crying. How did that happen?
It's all real. I hate to say this, but okay. So when the son cries in the library, he was done that day. He really didn't want to be doing what we were doing, and he was, for whatever reason, just not feeling Amy that day. And his nanny we put in the scene, so she's sitting on the rug with him. And then I asked his mom if this was okay. I was like, can she just pick him up and carry him out? And even if he cries, it's fine. It would kind of work for the scene, but she needs to come and get him. And she was like, go for it. And so I told him that was going to happen, but he didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay playing with his nanny at the rug. So Amy, I was like, his mom knows you're just going to pick him up. Whatever happens, just roll with it. Like, just be his mom. If he's upset, he's upset. That's all right. What do you do when your child's upset? You just get out of there as fast as you can. And sure enough, I mean, he cried just as we expected.
Yeah, it felt really real to me. I've wrestled like a crying kid, and it just
Oh my God.
Felt very real.
And your feeling when you're walking out of a quiet place with a screaming kid is just like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, don't explode. I know. And then the other crying kid in the book babies, I mean, he started crying on our very first take, and none of us really knew why, except for his mom was just like, I don't know what's happening. He's just nervous. Something about this whole experience. And he started crying, standing up and crying. And we just kept rolling. Sounds so mean. I'm not a mean person, but we kept rolling because it was like, it feels real. I mean, he's crying. It feels real. And then eventually we had to cut because he was crying too hard. And his mom came in and we took him out of the scene. But in my mind, I was like, we'll probably use those moments of him crying because it was very real.
It felt really real. And I guess that kind of segues us onto the schedule of things, because it's like, how do you schedule around that kind of, those situations, the children and the dogs? Like, how did you build that in?
Dogs are easier to schedule than kids. You know, I think with the twins, we would have like 4 hours with each of them a day was the limit. And they're in tons of scenes. So my first AD, Jonas, is also a parent of little kids. And there was so much talk about like, okay, we need to start the day with this playful scene. We got to get them in here. We're going to like gear them up for this, or we're going to make sure they don't have breakfast. So when we come in, they're going to eat, and we're going to ask them what they want, and we're going to have all this breakfast for them so they'll eat or whatever. It was just like this thoughtful planning around where the kids might be and when they might be sleepy or when they might be hungry or when they might be grumpy or when they're in their best mood. Which kid slept better last night? Which one should we start with? How do we, you know, which one's in the mood to play? Which one's like pissed off? And okay, we kind of need a kid who's pissed off today. Let's use that one right now. And, you know, it was also like a lot of communication with their parents and their grandparents who were with them every day of like, who's gonna be better for this part? Who's going to be better for that part? And then adding a lot of just buffer time.
So how many pages were you shooting a day?
Our schedule was, I think, 35 days. So, you know, we were in a fairly tight position of maybe 4 to 5 pages every day. But stuff with the kids just always had to have more kind of room. I can't totally remember.
Yeah. Were there any days where you felt anxious about time?
Every day.
Every day. Did you make all your days as you went?
Every day.
Yeah. And
I'm always nervous about time.
Yeah.
And I also am very goal-oriented, and I do make my days.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever not made a day.
Yeah. It's a bad feeling, isn't it?
Yeah. I've definitely had to cut scenes, or I've had to cut down on shots, or I've had to be like, okay, we're not going to get this today. We're going to just distill this whole scene into one shot. But
and were there any days where what happened with the children meant that you suddenly had to really regroup and rethink?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, or, you know, just what happens with life. Everything's unpredictable with shooting. You can have a plan, and then things don't go according to plan, and things have to shift. But yeah, I mean, there were definite days where whatever I had planned or thought how I thought a scene might go wasn't happening the way that I thought it was going to go. But there was always something new there that was also fun and exciting, especially with the kids. Yeah. They're so spontaneous that you feel like it makes everyone be very present. And I kind of like that it throws actors a little bit off kilter, and they can't just do what they practiced at home. Like they have to kind of be really in the moment.
And it just kind of coming back again to the tone as well, because it's so beautifully crafted. You know, the monologues, like talking about what people have practiced at home, those monologues are really beautiful. Yeah. And the way they're shot is just so present to the actor. Yeah. Can you talk a bit about how you conceived them and actually just the tonal conception, how you weaved that into the script, and then how you, and beyond, like how you started to build it?
I mean, one of the beautiful things about Rachel's book was this voice and this kind of witty, rageful, sarcastic way of seeing the world. And that's why I loved the character so much. And it was like, how do I take this very internal monologue and find a way to externalize it? And I'm not as afraid of voiceover as other people are necessarily. It's like everybody hates voiceover. You can't even talk about voiceover. Everyone gets so mad. But I think voiceover can really have a wonderful function sometimes. But I also was thinking a lot about how it feels when you are feeling disconnected from yourself, and particularly when you're feeling as an aging woman and as a mother, like you're feeling like nobody listens to you anyway. And sometimes you're speaking and nobody is hearing you anyway. And I was thinking about my husband's grandmother, who once told me about walking into her house with her kids and her husband and telling everybody that she wanted to go back to college, and that nobody even turned off the TV or like turned around and heard her. And how much as mothers we end up feeling like we're speaking without anybody even hearing us. And something about that idea just led to this concept of her speaking out loud, not to camera, but just speaking out loud and no one hearing her, and how invisible she feels, and how much she just feels like she's, even though she's with a child, she feels totally alone. And there was a line that I cut out of the movie where she said something like, how can I feel so alone when I'm almost never alone? Because that's the duality, I think, of parenthood, especially when you first have a kid, is like they never leave you alone. They're touching you at all times. Your body is no longer your own, but also you feel so alone. And so that's where that kind of concept of speaking out loud happened. And those monologues, are largely pieces of the text from the book that I loved. And then trying to come up with kind of a way to, I created that kind of device where you kind of flash back in time and you don't know if what she said was real or not, with like the slap and things like that. And so then that kind of was a device so that I could get these big monologues out in the middle of a scene as it's happening, without it just being voiceover and her sitting at a table just, with a long, long voiceover thing. It was really about like that feeling of sort of floating above yourself and looking at yourself at a table of hip, cool people who you have nothing to relate to about anymore, and letting that full internal monologue just go. And pretty much all of those longer monologues are in one shot, and they're just a zoom into Amy's face. And, they required a lot from everybody around her, like to really kind of maintain as though everything was happening, and for a long, long time, while she got really quiet and internal. And I don't think I told her until the day at the grocery store that I was going to do these in one shots. And then she was kind of like, wait, what? And then, because it's a lot, like it was a lot of dialogue to be like, no, I needed the whole thing to be really good. But then she nailed them. I mean, like, she's so good. She was already good at them, but I think realizing like, okay, I'm going to keep up the pace and we're going to get this in one full shot that you're probably not going to cut away from.
Mm-hmm. And how many takes did you have roughly of those?
For those monologues? I remember in the grocery store, it was the 7th take where she nailed it. Okay. I don't usually do that many takes, not like 7 or 8, but for that, because it was so specific and the tone of that monologue is so kind of like off the cuff, but manic, and has all of these kind of real builds within it. There was a lot of direction in there to kind of keep it on its bigger trajectory so that I didn't have to cut away.
Yeah. And had you kind of stepped through, like, what was your process of walking through the emotional beats and stuff with her? Did you do it in advance?
Yeah, I think she and I did one day of rehearsal that was just she and I, even though we didn't rehearse with the kid, but it was more about kind of like nailing those personal kind of to self moments within the story. And we just read through them and kind of talked about them like table work, like just what the beats were, what the build was, how she got from this scene to that scene, kind of just a real like loose framework so that she had something to hold on to when we got to those really tough days.
Mm-hmm. So you rehearsed that with her, then you did the 2 days
with Scoot.
And then everything else, I guess you talked through. Did you like do a kind of walkthrough of the entire script with her, like talk it?
Nope.
Right.
We really didn't have the time.
Yeah. And then with the, with her friends that she made.
Yeah.
Did you rehearse with them, or was that on the day rehearsals as well?
No, just on the day rehearsals. They were so great and funny and bonded very quickly. And the first scenes we filmed were in the library with that book babies scene, and it was pure chaos. I mean, it was like our first day trying to have more than just the son, having all those kids in the book babies and all the parents and the things of like somebody crying and this and that. I mean, that was honestly one of the hardest days was trying. And I kept saying like, the chaos is going to be good. We're going to go with it. Like nothing has to happen. It's not like this has to be like a well-behaved group of kids. Like it's going to be fine. But it's harder than that. And the continuity is very difficult because kids do not follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so kind of like taking it onto like because there's so many different elements of craft.
Yeah.
And I think something about your work is so seamless that it looks effortless. And like, so I think as directors, like what we know is like, it's super not effortless.
Yeah.
And so, there's,
I mean, the hope is to make it look effortless.
Yeah.
Or I think that's the hope of directing, and that you don't want things to seem like you want it to feel like it just happened. But it is sometimes frustrating after you make a movie that people seem to think it just kind of happened like that. And you're like, I spent so many years making sure it felt that way.
Yeah, because you've got stunts, you've got VFX, you've got wire work.
Yep.
You've got grade shifts. You've got like camera work that's really you're doing things where you're going in from comedy and then segueing into horror and using the visual language of horror, the sonic language of horror.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about how you and your team and how you communicated that vision to everyone, so everyone was on the same page and the producers were on the same page with you tonally?
Yeah, I mean, my DP and I have worked together on 3 movies now. And so that's nice because I feel like we have a real shorthand when it comes to understanding the visual language and how we wanted to tell it. And he has much more of a horror background than I do. So there are real kind of horror shots in there that he would explain, okay, we're going to do a push and pull here. Like it's the classic hallway horror shot. And I was like, okay, I don't know about horror shots or how you shoot a horror movie. This sounds interesting. And we shot it anamorphic, which we had shot the first movie that we had filmed together, The Diary of a Teenage Girl, anamorphic. And then we kind of switched. The one kind of lens change was we switched to these kind of spherical portrait lenses when we did the flashbacks to her childhood in the Mennonite community. But, he and I talk from a very emotional place about the technical. Like I tend to talk about what I want something to feel like and what I want the audience to be experiencing in the moment. And I have certain shots that I'm really clear about going in, but a lot of times it's a real collaboration between he and I. Like one of the shots that I was like, had in my head when I wrote was her face down on the carpet as like a hard cut when after the night of trying to get her kid to sleep. So certain things like that where we're really like planning out the shots, but largely we work in a really fluid way and we shot list but there's also a certain amount of fluidity based on what the actors need or how the blocking ends up shifting when we rehearse and all of that.
So for a lot of it, you going on set, you're doing your blocking rehearsal, watching it and kind of whispering? Yeah,
it's usually like he and I get there first, make sure we have a really clear plan of where we think the blocking is going to go. I'll say what I have in my head. I think I want them to get up here and move here, and maybe it's around this table, and I thought it could feel like a boxing match, and they could be moving, and he'll be like, okay, but can you make sure that you favor that side, not that side, because of these lights, and this window light is going to be better on the, and I'll be like, okay, we can turn it this way a little bit, and then get the actors in, walk them through it. Sometimes they like that, whatever my idea was, and sometimes they're like, oh, I really thought we were going to be sitting next to each other on the couch. And then it's like, okay, well, let's try it sitting on the couch and see how it feels. And if it really works, maybe we switch this, and then, so it's him and I having a very clear plan, but also enough flexibility that if everything shifts, we can shift it. And then, just kind of trying to move I think every movie, you have to move pretty quickly in order to be able to give the actors enough time so that they can have time to play within the scene as well.
And then so you're shooting 4 to 5 pages a day, but you're also doing stunts. So
on the days we're doing stunts, we weren't shooting 4 or 5 pages. Stunt days. There weren't, the stunt days or the stunt days or the dog days or any of that. There was less less pages on those days for sure.
And can you talk about some of those set pieces? Because your set pieces, they're like massive, but they're tiny, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Like you know, there's a lot going on. So you've got Amy Adams potentially falling over, do you know what I mean? Slamming hard on the floor.
Yeah. That we had a stunt double who actually her focus of her stunt work had been quadrupeds, like working as an animal on four legs. So she was our stunt woman and stand-in for Amy, not stand-in, our stunt double for Amy and for the mother's mother, and then was also our movement coach. So she was on set a lot and kind of worked with us on some of the digging stuff, but also she was the one who did that fall. She did it once and it looked like it hurt so bad. But she immediately was like, I can do it again. And I was like, no, we have it. That was great. We are not doing it again. But yeah, she was hardcore.
Cool. Okay, time for the audience.
Congratulations on the film. I was very moved by it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask about the sound design, because it was very meticulous, and you've got voiceover, monologue, unnaturalistic sound, and naturalistic sound all mixed together. And I just wanted to know what your process and approach was for that.
So, you know, there are certain moments, I will say, when you asked if there were alternatives or alts for any sections, the only moments that sometimes I did do alts for was I would try one section in voiceover and then I would try having her say it out loud, and I would get both versions just to see what I wanted at times. But that's sort of one of the only times I did that was in the art gallery at the end when she's kind of giving her longer monologue about motherhood. I love sound design. I feel like it's so important that everything feels as real and human as possible. One of the things that I tell my sound people right away is like, make sure you're catching all the human sounds, whether it's like a stomach growl or whatever, and we're not going to clean it up. I really hate ADR. I try to get everything as wild as possible. And so, which is sometimes really tricky, but things like when Amy goes into that monologue in the kale salad scene at the table, that was really a moment of like, we were treating it like a theater piece where I explained to everyone, including all the extras, how this was going to work and that it was going to need to become as quiet as so that you could hear a pin drop while she gives this monologue, and they were going to have to act like it was all still going. It was sort of just like turning the lights down in a scene instead of fading out or something. It was like, we're going to do this practically. We're going to start really loud. We're going to start with all of this hubbub, and as this happens and you watch this camera move, everyone has to go silent and know that we're in a very intimate scene with just her, and you're all still going to be here, and we need all of your help on that. So things like that, where we're sort of approaching the sound from a really practical point of view. My brother is my composer, and he has done all 4 of my movies now, and he had a lot of really cool ideas for this movie about kind of using the human voice and natural sounds within the soundtrack too. And that kind of became part of our overall guiding force, was like thinking about animal sounds, dog heartbeats, you know, things from the natural world, women's voices to be sort of a big part of the kind of percussive elements within the movie. We had Amy do some actually vocalization within the sound booth in our ADR sessions so that we could kind of manipulate them and use them in some of the more kind of horror-y moments of sound. You know, and then there's plenty of me screaming in there too, because there would be times where we didn't get something we needed, and I was like, I really need this certain level of scream or this level of something, and I just blew my own voice out to do it.
I always think one of the interesting things in film is trying to create art within movies.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, there's a whole kind of art exhibit at the end. So I was actually really curious kind of like if you could talk a little bit about the process of creating the art exhibit and, you know, what some of the inspirations were and how that kind of came about.
Yeah. Art in movies is just like a kiss of death, right? Because it's always terrible. And it was this very fine line, right? Actually, the way Rachel wrote it in the book was that she did a performance art piece. And I'm like pretty theatery and woohoo, and even for me, sometimes performance art is like a turnoff because it's just too pretentious. And I was like, I don't know if I can put a performance art piece as like the thing that we really need to feel how talented she is at the end. So I made the decision to shift it to art to like being painting pieces and installations. And then my production designer, Karen, and I worried through all of prep that somehow we worked for so many weeks trying to figure out exactly what the art was going to be, because it felt like it was one of the most important things to nail for the end in order to feel like you went on the journey. So first we went through the process of trying to get like an artist that we would sort of use their already created art that felt on theme. And that ultimately didn't feel like the right way to go for so many reasons, because we also wanted to incorporate the other actors to the art. And there were so many themes from the movie that we wanted to bring in, like everything from the Natural History Museum and the sort of dead animals, taxidermied animals, and bones, and all of these different themes throughout the movie that we wanted to bring into the art and that I had written into the art. But I wrote what I knew was a placeholder for the art. I wrote just sort of beginning ideas. And so then Karen Murphy, our incredible production designer, ended up kind of spending all of this time curating all of these different artists, getting her head around what art could exist for this, and then creating it herself. So that meant taking pictures with the actresses, where we kind of had this concept of like a housewife with a dead animal or a housewife with a knife, or, you know, this sort of reframing of kind of a 50s housewife looking woman and taking all the women from the book. And so then we took all these portraits of them and she blew them up and had an artist paint them, but they were from her portraits that she had taken. And then I had a friend from theater school who made masks for experimental theater. And I asked her to make dog masks that were based on the 4 main dogs from the movie who we had had cast for many months. So I went to her knowing that her art would be something that felt real and authentic. And then Karen created like a video installation, and we sort of put our heads together, and it was really Karen insisting on what she needed in order to make that art feel really real.
Hi.
Hi.
Really like the movie, and I like the fact that you associated the word strength with women, and that actually was much needed, especially for what it means to be a mother and a woman. And I was actually curious about the choice of the animal, because I feel like dogs are quite tamed domestic animals, and I like this, you know, the subtle side of the wildness of a dog is still, you know, could act unpredictably. But I was wondering why you chose the dog specifically for that, rather than like a cat, for example, which is the opposite. Like,
Yeah. I mean, truthfully, Rachel Yoder was the one who started this dog metaphor with her book. And for whatever reason, it really rang true emotionally for me. I think I also thought a lot about the book Women Who Run with the Wolves, which was a big book for me when I was in high school. And I actually really believed that Rachel had been referencing that book because she has her book within the book, which is The Field Guide to Magical Women. And I said, well, so this was based on Women Who Run with the Wolves, right? And she was like, no, I've never read it, which was just a funny coincidence. She said, but everyone keeps asking me that. But so I think in my mind, because I wasn't thinking about domesticated dogs necessarily in that exact same way, I was kind of thinking about wolves the whole time, which is probably why I sort of chose this red husky to play Amy, was really because I had that Women Who Run with the Wolves feeling. And in terms of like the cat versus dog thing, I mean, I am very much a cat person, but I think there is something about the ferocity and the anger that felt much more suited to dogs. And a metaphor that kept coming to me was this idea that she was digging, she was excavating, she was going through her old stuff, going through her old art, going through her mother's stuff, her grandmother's stuff. She's like digging and digging and excavating the way that a dog would almost manically dig, which is where the sort of idea for the transformation happening in the garden and her digging and the transformation happening there kind of came from. But yeah, I mean, Rachel really came up with the idea of the dog.
Can I just ask you to reveal 2 cameos that I think are really cool?
Yeah.
Okay,
Rachel Yoder, the author of the book, is in the grocery store when she's eating the meatloaf out of the plate, and she looks up and there's a mom and her son looking at her like that. That's the author of the book and her son.
There's another 2 cameos.
Oh, which are the other 2?
There's you.
Yeah, there's me with my kids in the grocery store at the very beginning.
And then your brother.
Oh yeah, my brother, who's my composer, plays the leader of Book Babies, and he sings "What's Up with That Duck?" And yeah, it's so funny because that day, I guess I hadn't told Amy that it was going to be my brother there, and she turned to me and she was like, "Who is this actor? He's really good." And I was like, "That's my brother. He's the composer of the movie." But yeah, he's very, very funny, and he gets a lot of compliments on that really annoying role and that earworm that he wrote, which became our big joke on set all the time, was all of us singing "What's Up with That Duck?" I keep saying he's got to do a kids album, and that could be the title track. He really doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, no, I was actually the other thing I was curious about was the transformation sequence, because I noticed the way that it was done was through a lot of quick cuts, a lot of editing, and kind of like, you know, the process being this very sort of like whereas I think, like, especially in the modern age, people become very obsessed with digital technology and trying to do these things in kind of one, and oftentimes it can feel a little bit fake, and I thought there was a much more impressionistic way in the way that you went about it, and I was just kind of curious what your intentions were and what kind of the process of doing it was.
So one of the things I realized early on when thinking about a transformation sequence was that most transformations in any kind of body switching horror type movies are really painful and often horrific. And yet what I loved about Rachel's novel was that the transformation is really euphoric, and it actually feels like this liberating experience that actually feels pretty good. So that became sort of the way that we had to look through. That was the lens that we had to look through the whole thing through. And that came down to everything, like when she had the nipples and Amy's response in the mirror to it not being like, what the, you know, but having a much more like, oh, this is interesting. And that tone was going to kind of carry through to even when she really exploded into the kind of digging and everything started to shift and change. And you know, I didn't want it to look silly. It was always this fun line, right? Of like, it's a little campy. And there's some part of me that had fun with how like ridiculous the whole thing is too. And that she's like saying like blood, blood, blood. I don't know. There's like, it makes me laugh, parts of the transformation, but I didn't want you to be laughing at it from a point of being away from it. I wanted you to kind of like be in the joy and silliness of it with her. And so that was where the kind of quick cuts and just seeing little bits and little shifts happening came from. And then we carefully storyboarded it out. And, you know, we actually did a ton of prosthetic work. We did like fake prosthetic arms. We had pieces on her back. In the end, we used even smaller pieces than I imagined at times because it just felt like it had more energy. But we also shot some stuff where we shot like the spine kind of protruding out of her skin, and it felt too painful. It felt too negative when I wanted it to feel euphoric. And so instead we kind of tried to focus on the things that felt like liberating. Did that answer it? Cool. Okay, great. Thank you guys. Thank you.
This podcast was recorded at a Directors UK member event. You can hear plenty more directors in conversation by subscribing on the usual streaming platforms. Follow us on social media and find out more about us at directors.uk.com.